Good morning, I suppose, still everyone, and thank you, the organizers of the conference, for giving us the opportunity to speak today and share some of our opinions or experiences on the journey. So my name is Ines, and I'm the Director of Business Development at Startup Oman. So I hope at least one part of the room has heard of us. For the ones who have not heard of us yet, basically Startup Oman is the community player of the Omani entrepreneurial ecosystem. We are the only entity that's led by serial entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs, founded by an Omani businessman entrepreneur, Ali Daoud, and the Canadian serial tech entrepreneur, Sherry Colburn, sitting there at the back. And really, we are aware and we know pretty well that in order to really build a thriving entrepreneurial sector, it takes an energized community, a collaborative, energized community. And we see our role in doing our best to fill in the gap from the programs and services that exist in the market for entrepreneurs and what their needs are. And Ali's and Sherry's inspiration behind starting Startup Oman has always been to really provide an international quality platform for entrepreneurs, and also to expose them to the toughness of the entrepreneurial world. And so the reason, you might wonder how we do what we do. So we basically run startup community building programs. And the ones that have received the most visibility have been, one, the Silicon Valley program called Startup Grind, powered by Google for Entrepreneurs. And we're a designated chapter here in Oman that is really focused on showcasing the success stories from the region. And Caribou Chats, which is the educational program for startup community, modeled after the Kaufman's 1 Million Cups. And our aim is really to support the SME to SME commerce. And as Nader mentioned in his presentation, how do you bring the SME in front of the SME, let me put it that way, and really help them do business together? So that's something that we've been on a mission to do. We're as well a lean startup ourselves, and are going to celebrate 1 year, like the first birthday, next month. So my position as a business development director is kind of a lie, because I do everything else as well, as being a lean startup. But we do understand entrepreneurs, because we're entrepreneurs ourselves, so we know how 16 hours per day kind of schedule looks like and feels like. The objective of my presentation today, really, as Paul mentioned, is going to be to unveil the concept of entrepreneurship within the economic downturn concept, as number one, and really to share some, perhaps, tips from our side on how could smart entrepreneurs thrive in the economic downturn. And for the sake of the presentation, I would like to tackle potentially the terminology issue, and that's sort of like using entrepreneurs, SMEs, startups that we come across quite often. And at Startup Oman, we believe that within current ecosystem, that all of the entrepreneurs are SME from the point of the regulatory and their registration point of view, but not all of SMEs are entrepreneurs. And I would like to kind of keep that in mind for the presentation. So when it comes to, we also believe that entrepreneurship is a skill, is a mindset. It's really an urge to solve problems, like a desperate urge to solve problems. And it's almost like an obsession, I would like to say. And it takes a lot of resourcefulness as being a core skill, and innovative approach and disruption. So when we tie that up with really economic downturn, I kind of quite like so the Chinese word for crisis is actually a combination of two characters, danger and opportunity, which is quite interesting, and I think perfectly resonates with entrepreneurs swimming within the economic downturn as the external context. And history facts actually show, and this is just from the Kaufman Foundation report, that during the times of recession, the entrepreneurial activity actually increased. And that more than half, I believe, more than half of the companies, Fortune 500, launched in 2009, were actually launched during recession. So this is not to say that the recession is an ideal time to thrive, not at all, and it definitely takes a toll on entrepreneurs as well. But the key is really the mindset of entrepreneurs. It really is that sort of like building the survival muscle, as I like to call it, and not giving up, because you don't really have an option. You don't really have any other plan B, right? Entrepreneurs are very much in their core DNA, risk takers, while some of the businessmen are not, and that's just the way it is, and it's totally fine. Going back to really economic downturn, usually these are some of the terms or phrases we hear, and it does create a buzz around it. But if we take into the account that it is an external context, and it is something that potentially we don't really have an influence on, using I would like to call it the approach is that the entrepreneurial muscle, it almost calls for the creative entrepreneurship. And the creative entrepreneurship is really a skill, a mix of creativity, collaboration, and entrepreneurial thinking. When faced with the situation the way it is, the only way to look at it is, what is the opportunity for me in that current context? And some of those are very obvious, they're listed here as well. So sometimes even easier access to highly qualified talent because of the job losses, the unemployment rates that raise up. Usually the ones who are let go are not underqualified, but literally, due to budgetary costs, they're out. So in certain contexts, it creates actually an easier access to qualified talent. Another one is really less noise in the market. Need for innovation, because it really creates tons of problems. And small and nimble becomes an advantage. And of course, less competitors, because it really filters the strong ones. I also decided to, as I say, so there is always a big debate between cut back or focus on growth. And what we notice that happens in the entrepreneurial enterprises versus big corporations or companies is the more bureaucratic and more developed, they're focused on cutting back from marketing budgets, employees, and so on and so forth, while the small and nimble companies have their chance to really focus on growing their business and being very, very smart with their investment of time, resources, and capital. And obviously, thinking about the running an enterprise, entrepreneurial enterprise, it's the context of economic downturn has obviously huge emotional pressure, and that's where most of the startups crash, because their leaders are not able to handle the emotional load that comes with uncertainty, navigating, really working on that survival muscle. And I thought would be of a use and of a value maybe to the entrepreneurs in the room to prepare few tips on what could startups and entrepreneurs do to be more smarter. And the first one is basically rethink your business model. Simple as that. Focusing holistically on all the elements of it. First question is, has your competitors' analysis changed? Because the economics of the market do change. So does it mean you've got more competitors, less competitors? Have new business models emerged that you have to be aware of so you can tweak your own? What resources are really available to you? And do you really have a sharp consumer value proposition? So what's interesting is that during the times of the economic downturn, consumers are still, they're very picky with who are they going to exchange their value for, like your service. So it's almost like, how do you rethink your core existence as a business that corresponds to the current reality? And we tend to, just in day-to-day engagement with local startups, it's almost like, it kind of happens quite constantly, is that the initial impulse is to cut back, which is reasonable, but I invite for a holistic approach, looking at the complete business model, how it affects the quality of your service as well. Because as a small business, the quality of your service is really what's your key value proposition, especially if you sell the product that bigger companies sell as well. Another point that I would like, and I would like to touch upon is, and I like to call it know your numbers. And for the entrepreneurs or local startups, basically it means focus on going back to basics, focus on loss, margin, profit, revenue, like a very simple, like I would call it finance 101. And usually entrepreneurs, they're entrepreneurs who struggle with that. I mean, I'm not a very big finance kind of person, so I don't really like numbers, but it's really important because of the times of economic downturn, you get clarity from numbers. When they ask what to do, well, show us the numbers. So here is also an invitation to really get the support you need. Know where you're weak and get the support. It's also very important to review your financial targets, both on the selling side and the cost side. Be aware of the cost of your customer acquisition, because it may lead you to a conclusion to focus on existing customers versus acquiring new ones, right? Reduce inventories, or even better, repurpose them so you can actually make profit on them. And embrace technology to drive productivity. So cutting on the employment, cutting on letting people go. If you haven't thought how to use technology to still keep with the productivity and efficiency of your business, it's almost like a dead sentence in a way. The third point I would like to touch upon is really diversification. And by that I mean really diversifying your customer profile heavily. I think it was even mentioned in previous presentations. So how can you as an entrepreneur focus on other startups, other SMEs? So move away from being only government focused, because it simply means putting all your eggs in the same basket, as I would like to call it. And knowing really, being aware of the delay in payments, how does that affect your cash flow is really the key, right? And startups, I mean, cash flow is really the blood of cash flow is the blood of a startup, bloodstream of a startup, right? So it's almost like you got to be, as an entrepreneur, you got to be constantly on top of your cash flow, constantly day in, day out. So diversifying your customer profile is one way to go as well. Expand geographically if possible, and especially with the use of technologies. I mean, with the rise of internet-based businesses, it's easier than ever, and it's basically borderless. What's even more interesting, and I think in a lot of conversations with the entrepreneurs here locally, I believe you have an advantage that, obviously, me as an expert, I don't, which is really deep understanding of a cultural landscape and the language, and that's usually quite a big competitive advantage in comparison to your competition that comes from other parts of the world and tries to cater to the same market. So it is kind of obvious maybe, but it is of a huge importance. Create multiple product service lines. That's another one. And it's almost like, and again, like there are some successful stories actually, quite a lot of them, in how do you, aside from your core service or product, how do you think, oh, what else can I do really to monetize my business as soon as possible? And what does my customer need? What does he or she need? Really understanding their behavior, their lifestyle, their appetite, and serving exactly that. And many times our entrepreneurs, we've all done that, I guess, are so much focused on their product or service that they forget about their customer. Well, you exist because of your customer. So it's almost like really, really understanding and going deep into understanding the customer needs. Review your marketing. By that, I mean really what happens usually, it's like almost like a automatic effect, is that most of bigger companies cut on their budgets, marketing budgets, CSR budgets, you name it. What that creates really is a space, it's less noise first in the market, but it also creates space for small and nimble, highly creative startups to get out there and really thrive, get the visibility. You may wonder how. Well, simple. First, reduce spending on traditional media. No offense to anyone from the traditional media here. Increase your investment on social marketing, because it's a powerful tool. And with internet today, you can experiment and try things. Try to find ways how to communicate your value proposition in the most direct way and get the feedback immediately almost, thanks to the technology. And I think branding is really key in recession or any economic downturn, because at the end of the day, you're investing in customer retention and attraction. And let's be honest, would you place an order with a company that seems like it's going to go out of business in a month or two? You wouldn't. So it's simple as that. So, and no news actually means bad news, because you let your customers make their own conclusions, right? And that's not helpful. And in terms of startups, visibility is really your key asset. And having branding, like branding developed as a core, it's really a core asset of your business. And it potentially can have a strong impact on your sales increase. It can have a strong impact on your attractiveness to investors and potential employees. So it's really something that we encourage heavily to local startups that we come across and engage in our community, because it really is the differentiator for you as a small business. It is the story behind, it's that why. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why do you live and breathe every day, 20 hours a day, what you do? And it's extremely important. And how do you communicate it in a compelling way that is understood in this market, but also the markets beyond the borders? Because at the end of the day, I believe we all agree, Oman's economy needs more active entrepreneurs who are really creating enterprises that create economic impact and go beyond borders. Because the Omani market is fairly small, so if there is a noise, then you gotta diversify as well as a business. I did my homework, and I wanted to kind of share a few examples from the globe, knowing that the economic downturn is really a context, and it's a cycle, and it happens everywhere. And no matter the maturity of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, startups face it, and they have to deal with it. So it's just the way it is. And it's almost like thinking of entrepreneurship, synonymous for entrepreneurship is really risk-taking and not giving up. It's almost just another challenge. A big one, but just another challenge in which you need to try. So I wanted to share, so there are a few examples of startups from times of recession, times of economic crisis in different countries that did apply certain elements of what I've just said. And for example, in Greece, it's an internet startup, really offers a hotel recommendation service. And what made them try really was focus on international markets. And as the founder said in the interview, he said, none of our clients are based in Greece. None. Another reason why they've been really thriving, and they managed to raise around, I think, 200,000 euros first round, were really low operational costs in Greece and fluctuating staff, so having five full-time employees, up to 15, depends on projects. And affordable talent access, because what happened in Greece with a huge unemployment rate, all of a sudden you had loads of highly educated, hungry young people who are looking for jobs. Another one comes from the USA, and it's basically the largest equipment rental company in the country at the moment. But their focus was really on training and staff involvement, which kind of, I found it interesting, because usually it's like, the first thing we notice is like, cutting budgets and training and letting people go. But they said that their success as a small business really depends on the quality of service they provide. And if all of their competitors provide the same service, the same product, then their service has to be extremely, amazing. And they focused on training. They focused actually on involving their staff in brainstorming sessions. How could we cut costs? What happened, though, is that, first of all, their staff felt involved. There was no element of fear. Because if your employees are freaked out, whether I'm going to have a job next month or not, they're not focused on growing your business. They're focused on looking for a next job. So as an entrepreneur, as a startup, there's an internal element to your HR that can really elevate your business further. And when I as well focus on training, how can you use technology instead of perhaps flying your employees all around the world, flying in the trainers, facilitators? How could you use the e-learning platforms that have been highly successful all across the world? to provide more knowledge, inspiration, involvement to your staff. So just another quite an interesting story. Then the third one, there is a Canadian SME. Basically, they purchase, restore buildings and repurpose them for vacation homes, rental spaces. And in their case, they come from the Bonavista region, the Newfoundland, which was heavily hit by the oil prices, obviously affected. However, in their case, their business had been thriving best in years. And the reason was really deep understanding of their customer profile and their behaviors and their lifestyle. And they really targeted the creative class, as the entrepreneur, the CEO said. And that was it, simple as that. It was a niche market for them that really has been almost like a winning formula so far. Spain, though, brings another interesting sort of trend, which is the rise of technology entrepreneurship. That hasn't really been, it's not the first thing you would associate Spain with as the technology entrepreneurship. But the interesting thing is, again, due to the high unemployment rate and the very collaborative ecosystem, private and public, and the incubators, accelerators that all of a sudden showed up, they offered entrepreneurs to support only for 1 year, support in training, mentoring, funding for 1 year, which puts, again, a lot of pressure on the entrepreneur themselves. You got to figure things out. But it also drives innovation. And for most of the tech businesses, and the INPOC is the online investment platform after the big crash of the banking system. And the two entrepreneurs came together and they thought, oh, what's another way we could offer to the Spaniards to invest? And the affordable, high-quality talent was a key in this case too. And the fact that they're pitching to investors from the US, UK markets, outside of Spain and in Spain. So a lot of times entrepreneurs ask us, oh, so there's not enough money, this and that. Well, how well do you understand the MENA VC landscape, perhaps? How well have you done your own market research in just understanding who the VCs are in the region? And what does it take for you to have your MVP or have your prototype to even knock on someone's door? Simple as that. And the last one is obviously the example from Oman, from our own observations and experience, and it really is, what are the trends locally here? It's definitely a more collaborative ecosystem. We are grateful, we have actually executed several programs with the ecosystem players, the incubators, and some of them are here today as well. The recent rise of entrepreneurs developing mobile apps, it's again something we've noticed. At the same time, we've noticed there are huge opportunities in the fintech, tourism sector, renewable energies, almost like an empty space waiting for hungry and eager entrepreneurs to leave their mark. In terms of the good case practices and the areas for growth, through our community building programs, we're really striving to find those guys who are really doing their best on a day in, day out basis and really extract their experiences. And we've had amazing examples of the diversification of their portfolios, creating multiple revenue streams, training their staff and educating, investment in branding. And I don't think it's fair if I promote some of the startups, because we've got around, I think, the community of 800, so I'm not going to point out any of the companies. But there are amazing stories out there. And then still, at the same time, opportunities for growth. Again, focus on diversification heavily, raising the financial literacy or education of entrepreneurs, and really knowing, doing proper market research, understanding your competitors, understanding your customer profile heavily. This is just a little photo from one of our Caribou Chats, one of our community building programs. And in conclusion, I would just like to add, again, diversify, focus on visibility. For startups, it's really, the visibility is key, whether it's your ability to share knowledge with other startups, engage in networking events that are perhaps even specific for startups, so you can get to know other entrepreneurs, hear how are they doing in the economic downturn, what are their learnings, find potential partners, find new staff. There are a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs who don't want to go on that path, but are could make excellent employees of your startup business as well. And pivot and innovate. Play on the strength that you're small and nimble. And the fact that you don't have a board of directors, a hierarchy of 100 people, decision-making is as easy as it is. And changing strategies, it takes a day or two, right? So that would be my kind of invitation. And other than that, I'd like to say, obviously, starting a business, there is not really a right time to start a business. It is now. Because there is always going to be something that's going to make it be the right time, and something else that's not going to make it be the right time. So my advice would be really focus on what needs to get done, focus on really what are the things that you can influence, and the things that are out of your scope, just move it aside. I believe that's it. And I would like to thank you all. I hope this was of value. And Chair and I will stick around for the rest of the day and would love to meet you all. Thank you.
Thank you.